All right, you guys. So, for this week's mini lesson, we're talking about poetry, and we want to start off by looking at how to actually read a poem. And I know that might sound kind of silly to some of you. Like, what do you mean, how to read a poem? I know how to read. Well, poetry is different than a book, and it's different than a nonfiction article. You have to read poetry multiple times to truly understand it. And that's everybody, myself included. The more times you read a poem, the more sense that it makes. And the main reason for that is because poems are full of symbolism and similes and metaphors and different things that require a closer look. So, for today's poem, we're going to be reading The Rose That Grew from Concrete by Tupac Shakur. If you don't know Tupac, Tupac was a rapper. He was extremely influential. And what a lot of people may not know is he was also a poet and he was extremely intelligent. Um, if you're curious in learning more about him, not just his music, I recommend looking at some of his interviews on YouTube, and you may be surprised at how much he could really do and how interesting of a person he truly was. Um, so, looking at this poem, the first time that I read it, I'm just going to read it for the gist of it. That just means I'm getting the basic idea. Okay. Did you hear about the rose that grew from a crack in the concrete? Proving nature's law is wrong, it learned to walk without having feet. Funny it seems, but by keeping its dreams, it learned to breathe fresh air. Long live the rose that grew from concrete when no one else ever cared. Okay, so that first read through, all I'm trying to do is get a basic understanding. And my basic understanding of this poem is that it's about a rose that grew in a difficult situation and it proved nature wrong. Okay, now my second read through, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for symbolism and I'm going to look for similes and metaphors, personification, things like that to try and understand the poem a little more. So, did you hear about the rose that grew from a crack in the concrete? Proving nature's law wrong, it learned to walk without having feet. Okay, I'm going to underline this because roses can't walk. Okay, so that's personification. Funny it seems, but by keeping its dreams, it learned to breathe fresh air. Again, um, personification, right? The rose is doing things that only people can do. They don't breathe, they don't have dreams. Long live the rose that grew from concrete when no one else ever cared. Okay, so my second read through, now I'm thinking about the deeper meaning in the poem. Okay, it's full of personification. The rose is obviously a symbol for something else, right? Then on your third read through of the poem, you want to ask yourself, what does this poem really mean? What's it really talking about? So I'm going to focus in on the rose and decide what that rose could really be. Did you hear about the rose that grew from a crack in the concrete? Okay, so maybe a person that grew up in a tough situation, the concrete is the bad situation. Proving nature's law is wrong, it learned to walk without having feet. So even though everybody said if you're poor or you come from a bad neighborhood, you can never be successful, it learned how to do it anyways. Funny it seems, but by keeping its dreams, it learned to breathe fresh air. Long live the rose that grew from concrete when no one else ever cared. Okay, so to me, this poem is saying that one, I think the rose is probably Tupac or someone that he knows, and they grew up in a tough situation and no one believed in them, but they kept their dreams, they focused on their goals, and they learned how to do it on their own. And the line that talks about how no one else ever cared shows that they see themselves as an independent person and that they became successful by themselves. Um, so I read that poem three times. You guys are going to have some questions to answer about it. And then tomorrow you'll have a new poem and you will read it three times on your own and we'll kind of go from there. If you have any questions, reach out to us and let us know what we can do. Thanks, guys.